now it is our pleasure to welcome to the podcast, oft referenced, and always a bit of research as we are digging around on the Clemson Tigers. Nobody has their finger on the pulse of that program quite like Anna Hickey, 247 Sports. Anna, the Clemson beat has become this very, very interesting, it is insular and at the same time attracts a lot of national attention. And it feels like, there's always that national, local, like push and pull. But I feel like you've done a good job of threading the line there. You represent 247 Sports. You're able to also still keep all your sources right there on the ground. How is the experience of being there and, making that trip to the facility, sliding down the slide, and sort of seeing the way that the beat has exploded over the last couple years?
Well, the slide, I can say, lives up to standards. We got to do it once, the media did, because Dabo's press conference is upstairs, and then we'll go downstairs to do player and coordinator availability. So sometimes they'll let us take the slide. There is a sign there that says players and staff only, though, but sometimes when they're not looking, we will slide down the slide. The facility is awesome. I mean, it's kind of been weird these past few months. We haven't been able to do anything in person. Everything's been via Zoom, but Clemson's been pretty good in terms of access. I mean, we're still getting coordinators during the week, which is one of my favorite things about it. I know a lot of schools around the country don't do that. And just the insight that Venables and Elliott can give us post-game and then during the week. I mean, I think my coverage of games and the analysis, that sort of thing is extremely better because of that, just what they're able to give you there. This has kind of been a turbulent offseason, though, for Dabo Swinney and Clemson. I mean, back in the summer, the racial injustice stuff was really kind of at its peak. Dabo was right in the middle of that, and then it kind of got going again last week when he was asked a question, a pretty sensitive question about Black Lives Matter, and that kind of went off the rails a little bit. There was some tension there between the media and Dabo. But this week, I think with a big opponent in Death Valley, we'll be kind of strictly talking about football.
All right, so let's talk football. Let's talk Clemson, because I think a lot of people are probably like me, who are sort of watching Clemson just on like the side TV, because they're blowing everybody out. And
I was listening to Cover 3, and Barton had zero to say about Clemson, Virginia, and I was really looking forward to that because Clemson didn't play that well.
So this is my question for you: is like, tell us, how is this the same level of Clemson as the last few? Like, because there is a lot of there's a lot of these young freshmen that are playing. They're missing some of these perimeter receivers that have been so critical the last few years. They're still blowing teams out. Like, I actually looked at when I kind of box score scouted the Clemson-Virginia game, because I only watched it in just sort of flashes here and there. I sort of looked up and I was like, you know what? Clemson kind of scored just about every possession except for maybe 3. I don't know what it was, 8 of 12 possessions or something. And so there's still clearly still just on this death march through the ACC, but I don't know that I have a firm grasp on whether this is the same. It's clearly still elite. It's clearly one of the top 3 or 4, but do you have a sense on whether or not this is just like always, or whether there's a crack in the facade, or whether, hey, maybe they're even better than we realize?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And I was thinking about this yesterday. Normally when as a Clemson reporter, I've obviously covered some big games, but it's normally in the postseason when we know what Clemson is and we know what their opponent is in the playoff. This year it's kind of different, covering a top 10 matchup, and I really don't know what Clemson is at this point. And Clemson, I mean, they've kind of been known to have that slow start. They're going to play a bunch of guys, develop their team, not show a lot maybe kind of early in the year, and then kind of come on. I don't know if they're going to be able to do that per se against Miami, but kind of a couple of things that you talked about. Still some question marks in my eyes at wide receiver around the perimeter. Worth noting that Joseph Ngata, their primary boundary guy, has been out the past 2 games with an ab injury. I think he's expected back versus Miami, so that'll definitely give them kind of a boost there. But you're right, they don't have Ross. Latin has done some good things, but I still think they're waiting for him to be super consistent, especially with the deep ball. Amari Rogers has looked really good now that he's healthy off that ACL injury, and he gives him a vertical threat, which is something that I didn't necessarily expect coming into the season. I thought he'd be mostly an underneath guy. And then Galloway, the tight end, has stepped up in certain occasions that Virginia kind of shut him down. So I think that'll be an interesting matchup to see if on Saturday versus Miami, to see kind of if those receivers can get going. But yeah, just big picture. I mean, this defense is different. And I know every year Clemson loses some key pieces, whether the NFL or graduation, but we kind of just expect Clemson's defense to be Clemson's defense because of Brent Venables and the way they develop the guys in their program. But I think they have 3 starters back. So there's a lot of young guys. And then up front, they're missing Xavier Thomas, Justin Foster, and Tyler Davis. So that's 3 starters. And their defensive front still has performed well. But, I think that's something to note.
What's going on with Tyler Davis?
He got banged up in the second game, Raby? Am I right about that? The first game?
No, he did not play versus Citadel. He got banged up in the Wake Forest game.
Yeah.
Won. Yeah.
Okay.
And then Foster's kind of in protocol, undisclosed stuff there. I don't think he'll be back this week. And then Thomas, they're trying to work him in maybe later this month. So, yeah, that's our 3 starters right there along the defensive front. But I think the main thing has been the secondary. 2 corners. Their corners have been pretty locked down. Darren Kendrick on one side and kind of a mix of Booth and Mario Goodrich on the other side. But safety, losing Tanner Muse and Kayvon Wallace, they're just such playmakers in the middle, super savvy in stopping the run, just kind of patrol that middle of the field back area. And they have Nolan Turner there, and then Landon Sanders, who's a first-year starter. And I think that's another key matchup on Saturday, just how those guys perform defending Brevin Jordan and Will Mallory.
So to your point, I looked at there have been 11 regular season games against ranked teams since the start of 2015, since the championship run starts. Average points allowed in those games, 18.5. And a lot of 24-10, 27-7, 14-6. If possible, my theory is big game Dabo. Big game Dabo wants to let Brent go and win the game. He wants to let the defense go and win the game. He'll take the field goal. If the red zone try doesn't work out, he will punt to play field position and run the ball to avoid making that kind of game-changing mistake. And I like what you said, because it's every year the defense sort of shifts an identity, right? At least in terms of what they do well and sort of schematically what they're trying to do. Does this defense, especially with some of the attrition that you just mentioned right there, does Clemson have a defense to be able to play that big game Dabo style and limit Miami's up-tempo offense to let that group lead?
Yeah, I think the tempo is key because Miami likes to use tempo to kind of catch you sleeping, alignments, eyes, that sort of thing. Clemson was not good in that department against Virginia, especially in the pass plays. They let, I think it was 4 pass plays of 20-plus yards, and then they let Armstrong scramble and kind of get outside the pocket. So it was interesting what Clemson did defensively against Virginia, though. They didn't really bring pressure. They kind of dropped into rushing lanes, I guess more to just kind of contain Armstrong with his legs. But I don't know. If I was betting, I would not think that would be the same game plan against King. I think Venables is going to dial some more stuff up and bring more pressure to kind of see what they can do in the backfield there. But, I don't know. I think Venables, his scheme, he's so smart. I think he knows what kind of personnel he has, their strengths and their weaknesses. So I'd be surprised if he doesn't kind of have an A-plus game plan this week. He talked about it this week, just how much he's kind of relishing this opportunity to go against King and some of these playmakers. So, when you look across the board, other than up front, you're not going to, and maybe at corner, you're not going to have any of these 4 5-star guys jump off the page at you at linebacker and safety. So it's kind of been like that for Clemson. So in that sense, you kind of think that, this defense is going to be like defenses in years past, even though they're inexperienced just because of Venables. But I still think we're waiting for that test to see if that's going to hold true.
Yeah, but I feel like that's all the last couple of years, I remember the knock on Clemson, from other coaches was, I don't know, their safeties aren't that good. And then you look up and, Kayvon Wallace gets drafted in the 4th round, and I just feel like they're always more talented than we give them credit for. I'm curious on Brandon Marcello just wrote a piece for 24/7 Sports, like why Miami thinks they can beat Clemson or whatever. And Miami's got, they're 3-0, and I've got them ranked third in the country on my CBS poll. Yeah. Why are you laughing at that? I got to rank third in the country on my CBS poll. I'm building up the hype here, and Miami gets all juiced up for these kind of games. And
you've got BYU 4, right?
They're like ninth. Yeah, they're up there. So my question is, does Clemson think that they are invincible, or does Clemson think that they can? And I know that that's obviously a very abstract question, but the vibe you get from this program this year, this cycle, do you think that there's an element of invincibility to their mentality, or not? Because there are some of these kind of new faces defensively, new faces on offense.
I think that they are not going to – if they do think there's some cracks, they're not going to show it, whether that's a coordinator or especially Dabo Swinney. I mean, you hear Dabo talk about his team, and they're not going to lose to anybody. But I do think that they recognize, especially the players, they recognize the youth on defense and how that might take a few games to kind of start clicking, especially, like you said, at safety. And then up front if those guys are missing. But anytime you have Trevor Lawrence and Travis Etienne and an offensive line that's pretty good, I think you're going to have a chance regardless of kind of where your other pieces might be lacking. So, I don't know. If you were asking me that question, do I think there's some invincibility there? I think that they just have so much experience in these big games, so much success in the postseason that they have a blueprint, and they feel like if they stick to that blueprint, even, think about the North Carolina game last year, that was when it was like, oh no, is Clemson going to have that season where they maybe don't get to the playoff this year? And then they did. So I just think that they take their time developing their team in the beginning of the season, and they feel like if they trust their plan, then by the end of the year, they'll be where they want to be.
If they want to, they can't lose though. Because that was the other thing is I was going back doing that research, the one time where Clemson's hand was forced was against Lamar Jackson. Like, Lamar Jackson was a game changer, and he came into Death Valley October 1st, 2016, and all of a sudden, a couple quick scores, and all right, we got to get out of our game plan. We got to find ways to start getting some points real quick. And do you think that Derek King can be Lamar Jackson in this scenario? Not necessarily that Miami's going to win because of him, but is he that kind of game changer in your eyes where he might force Clemson to go a little bit deeper in the playbook, or not go as deep in the depth chart, just to make sure that they keep the talent level high to be able to keep pace?
Yeah, I think he's that type of dynamic player. He's not as fast as Lamar, right? So right. I don't know if – and Lamar kind of got Clemson on the edges a few times strictly with his speed. So I don't know if that's going to necessarily hurt Clemson as much. But I do think in terms of just talking about a dynamic quarterback, he likes to throw. He's very accurate. He's very consistent. He's got a plethora of pass catchers, even though – to me, one of the things to look at is just kind of how their wide receivers haven't necessarily had those breakout games yet. I mean, obviously they have Brevin Jordan and Will Mallory, but wide receiver-wise, I think, you could still stand to see more from Mark Pope. But, yeah, I mean, if he's not passing, then he's scrambling. I think he's averaging 15 yards a scramble. And then Dabo said yesterday he's averaging 5.4 yards after contact. So, I mean, he's physical. He's got everything you want in a quarterback. And and I think they have enough pieces in the run game with Harris and just explosive playmakers all around. And their scheme is so good, I feel like, with the tempo what Lashley's doing, and it actually looks organized for once, with Miami. So, I think that their offense, King definitely gives them a chance.
What's your pick, Anna? This is your chance.
Yeah, I'm going to pick Clemson. I feel pretty confident in that. Now, whether I'm going to go, what is the line now? 14? Mm-hmm. Somewhere around there. Mm-hmm. I haven't determined that. But, yeah, I think this might be a trendy upset pick this week. I don't know. But I think Clemson has just been there before. They have the big game experience. I don't know if they necessarily show their cards defensively versus Virginia. And I just kind of trust Brent Venables dialing something up for this Miami offense. and then I trust what Trevor Lawrence can do. And then I think Miami's run defense is a liability. So I think one of the keys is just kind of to try to get Travis Etienne going early. Could be a high-scoring affair, but I just think Clemson comes out on top.
So you obviously you cover the juggernaut in the league, and so as you look across the rest of the league and you look at if this isn't the game that Clemson gets beat, is there another team out there you have your eye on that could potentially challenge Clemson down the road, whether it's a matchup or whether it's just a team that you think is that good? Where does your attention go towards?
Well, Notre Dame, I think, is the obvious answer there, especially with the game being in South Bend. Notre Dame having played Clemson before, kind of understanding what they bring to the table and that revenge factor a little bit. But to me, it's not necessarily that one game that you circle. I mean, you could look at Pitt, maybe has some pieces. Virginia Tech, I think, has some pieces. But to me, it's just like that, they had that stretch, that 6-game stretch that's going to be pretty tough. And could they slip up there, especially in a weird era of COVID where you might have a key player missing here or there? Yeah. Kind of like when they lost to Syracuse. You weren't necessarily picking them to lose to Syracuse, but they had that one bad game last year where they could have lost to North Carolina. You wouldn't have seen that coming, but it happened. So I don't know if Clemson kind of got that out of their system against Virginia because, offensively, they got behind the chains, but overall they did well. Defensively, they didn't look good, though. So I don't know if that was their early season blunder, if we're kind of still you might still have that. I picked preseason, though, Clemson to lose one regular season game this season. And that was more so because of just the uncertainty of COVID, not necessarily because I could pinpoint one team that I thought they'd lose to.
Right.
But, I'm not saying that they couldn't lose this weekend. I definitely think they could, but I just think that you have to know something that I don't know if you're going to pick Miami straight up.
And I assume nothing has changed in terms of your preseason pick that you think they'll slip up somewhere along the way, or that you're predicting that they'll slip up somewhere along the way.
Yeah. Like I said, I don't know if I can look on the schedule right now and say, hey, this will be their slip-up game. I just think it could happen somewhere along the way. They've
won 38 out of 40 going into the year. So I guess now it's 40 out of 42? Stupid. Yeah. They win ACC games, and they win most regular season games, especially when they haven't lost a regular season game with Trevor Lawrence as a quarterback.
Well, Chip, you're on the over from the Edgewater Sportsbook and Emporium and Buffet, and so you might not see that slip up. I'm on the under along with Anna, and so I guess we'll find out if the COVID era is gonna catch them.
What is your pick in this game? Either one of you go. Are you allowed to say that, or do you have to say that later in the week?
I haven't crunched the numbers yet. So I don't have an official pick. I think Clemson wins. But whether it's a cover, whether it's I'm still figuring out how close I think it's going to be.
I'm on the under, and I'm on Clemson, and I think it is like it ain't going to be 38-3, but it might be one of those games where it's 31-10. And all of a sudden, it's just because kind of hard to run an up-tempo offense in a hurricane, even if your name is the Hurricanes. And when there's standing water on the ground and you're out there and it's splash, 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 splash as you're just trying to get going. I could see this being a game that Clemson is more than happy to turn into a rock fight because they just think that running the ball, they're going to be able to be better than Miami doing that. Miami's running up against Louisville and Florida State. UAB is the best defense that they faced. And I'm definitely buying in. I will say the two areas that do concern me are Brevin Jordan, who is an NFL everything, first-round pick in next year's NFL draft. And Clemson does have some standard issue, regular old Clemson linebackers like James Skalski. That's a Clemson tryhard at linebacker if I've ever seen one. Like Mike Jones, Balin Spector. Clemson's always got a couple of those linebackers that are just we're good development guys, and they do come up with big plays. But that just might be a size and talent mismatch if they get the wrong kind of matchups there. The other one, and I know Dabo mentioned this, I think yesterday, but Quincy Roche and Jalen Phillips are dangerous. And I don't know, like you said, Clemson's offensive line is what? They're all right. They're pretty good, but I don't think that there's many teams that will test them like Miami up front.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's probably the key matchup. Jackson Carman, Jordan McFadden defending number 2 and 15 for Miami. I do think we'll see some explosive plays this week. I mean, Miami kind of makes a living off that, especially with their tempo, whether it's in the run game or pass game, and I think Clemson does too. So I would be on the over, and I lean towards Clemson covering too. But they're official.
You said eye discipline, right? Clemson's eye discipline didn't look good, right?
There might be a buzzword that I picked up hearing Venables say it every single time we talk to him, but yeah, that's definitely important for tempo.
She is Anna Hickey. You can follow her on Twitter at AnnaH247. Follow all the action, 247 Sports. Clemson, no one does it better on the Clemson beat, so make sure that you keep tabs. It's been too long. Again, we often shout you out on the podcast for giving us those good nuggets. And
I'm a devoted listener, so I hear it. Yeah.
Yes, I'm glad you got to make an appearance. Anna, thank you very much.
Yeah. Thanks, guys, for having me.